and Assessment Committee for the Utah State Board of Education. And my name is Jenny Earl. I represent District 1. I'm the chair of the committee, and we'll go just down the row here and let everybody introduce themselves and tell us what district they're in.
I am Joanne Brinton. I represent District 15 in Southern Utah.
Leanne Wood, I represent District 4, South Davis County in North Salt Lake.
Hi, my name is Sarah Reel, and we are sitting in my district in this moment.
Emily Green, District 14. I represent the middle part of Utah.
Okay, thank you. And it looks to me like we don't have any public comment today. We're going to go ahead with our, we have a recognition at the beginning of our meeting. And so Leah, are you doing that? Okay, we'll turn the time over to Leah Voorhees to actually give that recognition.
Thank you, Chair. Leah Voorhees, Deputy Superintendent. I'm super excited to share this recognition with you all today. The Utah State Board of Education is committed to the vision of academic and organizational excellence in Utah education, and the mission is to open doors of opportunity for all children. This month, we're very pleased to highlight the work of AI in education, in Utah education, that deserves the significant recognition. On April 8th, USBE staff took home the Education Innovation Showcase for Impact Award for their work on empowering Utah educators, artificial intelligence for K-12 innovation. This recognition honors the groundbreaking AI work that is happening right here in Utah. While the whole steering committee for artificial intelligence in our agency played a role, we'd like to give a special shout out to Sarah Young and Matt Winters, who led the way through the Google Fellowship, AI summits across the state, and IHC grant initiatives. And we have a link where you can watch Matt and Sarah give their speech at the award ceremony. And then we also have the award. And I'd like to welcome.
Yeah. I was wondering why you were hiding there. It's like all of a sudden a grand entrance, right?
We don't have any ticker tape, sorry. So,
Okay. So we have a video
Thank
then
you.
said we're playing?
No.
Or it's just accessible?
it's a link.
Okay, gotcha,
so
gotcha.
all of you can
I didn't know
watch
if we
it.
had.
But we do
something
have
that-
pictures up.
Look at that, cute employees up there, so. Yeah, go ahead, make a comment.
So I told Matt this morning, but I did watch the video, and I thought was interesting is the name of the award, the Impact Award, because there were some really great things done by other leaders, but maybe stuck to districts or small areas, small schools, where this really showed the impact that you've had on the entire state, teachers, students, and so well-deserved. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. We were told by the judges afterwards that there was no contest to some degree. We're 672,000 students in the state of Utah, and some of those schools, doing amazing work, but they're in the thousands, the low thousands, and so it was wonderful to hear that feedback.
Well, very good. Do we have a showcase place for our awards? You know, like they do in the high school, they've got these big. A trophy case, yeah. So I'm not sure where that's going to sit. We may have to find a great spot for that. Maybe, is it sitting in your office? Maybe it's got to sit in your office.
Well, up until last night it was with Sarah Young.
Oh.
So I've taken custody, as she put it. So yeah, we can put it. I would love a trophy case. That would be amazing. I think we should have that highlighted for all of our employees here.
Yeah, that's great. All right, thank you. What's that?
One other brag, if that's okay, if I can get it up, but I wanted to let you guys know that Matt and Sarah also presented several times at the conference, but since then Matt and Sarah are getting a lot of national press, and this is an example of a tech
something.
Yeah, well, I'm on a NASB, so National Association for School Boards Technology Group, because of my work with Sky. And I was presenting the framework, and there was a handful of states that said they literally went back to their state offices and went, Utah's doing it, we've got to get started. So you are definitely trendsetters.
Well, just to add on to that for 30 seconds, I just got off a call with another state's DOE, and they're following suit with some of the things we're doing. We found out we were the first state to run consortium pricing for AI tools across the state, and now I've learned this week that we have 3 other states that I've spoken to that are now doing consortium pricing for AI tools. We're really leading the way, and I'm very proud of the work we did, and this blog post does a really great job enunciating what I've tried to put out there, which is it's not work that I'm doing, it's work that we're all doing, and it's so valuable to be part of the larger committee here in Utah. So thank you so much. Appreciate the recognition.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we can do one of those, yeah. I was going to add just one little piece to it, and that, sorry, it was, when we started down this road initially, we immediately created a framework to work from, right? And a kind of those ethical pieces, because we knew we couldn't wait. We didn't need to wait for legislation, right? Or for that type of a thing. And it was like, we also knew it was going to be moving quick. And that's the reason why we have you frequently come back, so that we're, the board and others are engaged and know where we're headed. So thank you. Okay, let you go. You're welcome. Okay, first on our agenda today, and this is item 3.3, R277476, Local Innovations, Civics Education Pilot Program, and it's a continuation. And I believe, is Robert Austin presenting? Are you? Okay.
He's online.
He's online, so if someone wants to present information, I had a couple questions I had asked prior to this that we can articulate, but if Robert wants to address a couple of those provisions, that would be great.
Good morning, Robert Austin, State Board of Education. Sorry, Board Member Earl, I'm not aware of those questions, so happy to.
Okay, well, let me just make you aware of the questions. Is that easier?
Sure.
The question was, why do we need to do the continuation? And if this is a pilot program, where's the research that they had started a couple of years ago? And we haven't received that yet. And I guess my question was, why would we continue without the research available? So that's the questions I had asked, and I did get answers to those. But do you want me to recite what I heard?
Well, yeah, and maybe it'll match what I think in my head.
Okay,
so.
well, you can tell me if I'm off then. My understanding was that the individual that's compiling the information over this pilot program would be finishing it after the continuation. So the continuation would need to go for another year because we have money associated with it. If we don't fund it, if we don't do the continuation, then we've got a problem with those that we've funded for the next year. And also that we would be reviewing this in the spring of next year, due to the fact we would have some information regarding the success of it, and it would finish out the funding. That's
Absolutely.
what I understood, so, okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to add, or if not?
No, I think that Jennifer may want to speak to just the kind of the procedure of continuation of rules at the 5-year mark.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Chair Earl. So to be in compliance with our legislative directive, we do need to go ahead and push this forward. But that information will be to us hopefully by the August meeting. It's supposed to be done mid-June, and then of course we won't have board meeting in July. So we will have that information, but the rule does need to go forward. Although we do need to make a small amendment. It currently doesn't have an oversight category. So whoever would like to make that motion, it is in our motion document. If we can get that on the screen. You're fine.
First, do I have someone that'd like to make that motion? I think
Yeah,
it's
right there.
listed on the,
That very first one.
They prefer the big screens hang on.
You can do that if you'd like.
okay. Vice Chair Wood, do you want to go ahead and make that
Yeah, I was
amendment?
going to read it off, but it's gone.
Oh, yeah.
1 second.
So it's category,
We have it listed category 2.
yeah. I move that we add the lines to make it a category 2 oversight category. to amend.
Wait just a second for that to pull up on the screen, so the,
You can give me the specific words, sorry.
well, and not just the specific words, but so the public
line
can
item.
follow along with us.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you. I move that the committee amend R277476, line 17, to add this rule. R277-476 is categorized as Category 2 as described in Rule R277111.
Okay, is there any discussion to that? All right, so the motion before the committee is that the committee recommends that the committee not continue, sorry, that the committee amend R277476, line 17, to add, it's a number 3, this rule, R277476, is categorized as Category 2 as described in Rule R277111. Okay, go ahead and vote. Are you in, those in favor? Sorry. I'm used to the button thing. All right, that is unanimous. We have 4 committee members, and currently Board Member Green is stepped out for a minute. All right, and I can accept a motion unless there's additional questions. Someone want to make a motion for that?
Okay, Chair, I'll make a motion that the committee continue R277-476, Local Innovations Civic Education Pilot Program, and forward to the board as amended, and forward to the board for approval.
Okay, any discussion to that motion? All right, the motion before the committee is that the committee continue R277476, Local Innovations Civic Education Pilot Program, as amended, and forward to the board for approval. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. That's unanimous. Board Member Green has stepped out. So we will move to the next item. The next item is 3.4. The action is on R277700, the Elementary and Secondary School General Core Amendment. And who's our lead on that?
You can start with me, then I'll probably
Okay.
pass it back to Robert. So this is
right.
in response to Representative Welton's bill that removed the civic test for our high school seniors and added a 0.5 credit to our civics requirements. So we've made a few changes in there. The first one's on line 280. I'll just kind of wait to scroll down to there. We've basically added an effective date for our 9th graders. We had a lot of feedback from our LEAs that there was confusion as to when these requirements will come into play. So we've made it clear in the rule that it starts for 9th graders in the year 26-27 for those students. So we've added that to lines 277, 280. And then on line 286, we added that 0.5 credit for the American Constitutional Government course. And then line 388, we removed the civic test for high school graduation.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? I actually have a couple, but go ahead.
Just one quick one.
Sure.
So is this course, so generally we look at government has been taken that senior year. Is this taken any time? It's just a required course that will be taken sometime in their high school?
Yeah, so it's just an extra 0.5 they can put in wherever they need.
Great, thank you.
My question is on line 389, and we've taken the basic civics test out for high school diploma. I'm just wondering, why is it left in for the adult education secondary diploma? And maybe somewhere in law it says we need to do that. I'm just wondering what that reason is.
Such a good question. So Representative Welton's bill did leave it in for the adult
Oh, it did?
education. It did.
Okay.
It sounded like it was an oversight in one of the subs. So I think this will be changed next year. But as of right now, currently in code, it does retain our adult students.
Gotcha. It just wasn't picked up
It just
when they,
wasn't picked
okay.
up, yeah.
Okay, because I was like, this is kind of counter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I just wonder, is it better to leave it in, and maybe that's with Representative Walton to talk about, because they wouldn't have had this class in high school and for quite a while. I don't know.
That could be a discussion we have with Representative Welton and maybe our adult ed specialist as well to see if it's something that still needs to be retained. But our understanding was it was an oversight. So.
Well, and let me ask this question. Those individuals in the adult education secondary program would have to take the half credit starting, right, with the rest of everyone else here.
So
So it's
currently-
an additional, plus they have to do the
Yes,
civics.
they
Okay.
do have to do the extra 0.5 and the civic test currently.
So it would
Sorry, I
just be
should
a
say extra.
cleanup next year. And I guess
Exactly.
that could go in even in our cleanup bill if we talk to Representative Well. Okay.
Definitely.
Are there additional questions in this area, on this item? I don't see, oh, go ahead.
Well, you had asked, we've talked to very many different LEAs to know how they want to address this, or is that not something we would, because I know at Washington County School District, they're going to bump up the requirement for graduation to 28 credits, where it's currently at 27, and they're just going to roll it in that way.
It's a really good question. So currently, we haven't had any feedback from the board on increasing the requirements that are right now. LEAs, it's up to their discretion, specifically with their electives. So each LEA, different ones are choosing to do different things, but it's all with their electives. So would be up to the board, I guess, when this comes into the board to decide if we want to increase our requirements for graduation.
So with that being said, we are taking a credit away from something else?
No, it basically
No.
just increases that, yeah.
So do we need to have that discussion here?
We can if you want to.
Okay. Did everyone kind of catch the nuance to that? That if we only require 24 credits, which would mean, really that would mean a half credit from your electives, right? Because this would now be a new requirement. Or do we want to proactively increase it to 24.5 for graduation, which would allow those elective credits it would allow everything else to maintain where it's at. Do we know how many, maybe this is the broader question, do we know how many schools are only 24 credits? Does that make sense?
I don't have an exact number, but it would be our alternative programs, care,
So our alternative programs would be impacted, but not starting until the ninth graders coming up because of the change here, right? So maybe that's the question to put out, because that would mean, but I guess a district can still flexibly add on whatever they wanted to, right? So if they currently only go the 24, they could do 24.5 and continue with their own. All right. There you go. Anybody want to discuss that or think about it out loud?
I just think would be a good thing to add the 24.5. This is such a good life skills background to have. I think this knowledge.
So
Go ahead.
it's
Board Member.
required, so we have to add it, right? Or we don't have
Well,
to.
we add that, but I think the question is what's going to happen is it'll take away from something that's elective.
Right,
Do we require the 24.5 now, which would mean
because
that,
they're going to be losing 0.5 of an
Yeah,
elective.
yeah.
And I guess I didn't plan for this, so I don't know how many electives are 0.5 and like what that impact could be.
yes,
It just makes it more tricky, because if you are, like, let's say that there aren't a lot of electives in those LEAs too, especially, or those programs that are 0.5 and they're all 1, then they're going to end up having to get more eventually, because they can't just replace a 0.5 with a 0.5. I mean, maybe they can't, I just don't know enough about what
Okay.
electives are available.
hold on just a second. Joanne, go next.
Well,
and then
I just wonder, do the alternative schools have electives where if they're sitting at 24 credits, but our district's already at 27, is that because of electives that are built in for regular LEAs?
Kathy Gray, do you want to come up and help us? And we can get we'll get all of our questioning out here, and then maybe we will have to wait till board meeting to make a decision on that. It's just sounding like people might want to get some more information from their local districts and people they work with, or we could make a recommendation. So do you want to add some?
Sure. Kathy
Yeah.
Gray, excuse me, Kathy Gray, Graduation and Concurrent Enrollment Specialist for the USBE. Let me just briefly just let you know that most LEAs have a graduation requirement that's higher now. Specifically, it's all based on how your day is carved up. If you have a 4x4, A day 4, B day 4, you're going to have 8 credit opportunity for the year. Times 4, you'd have 32 opportunity credits, right? We have a lot of people who do release time here in the state. And so no LEA that I'm aware of, unless they are only doing the 24, has all the way up to what they could possibly offer, if that makes sense. They've always reduced it so that there's some flexibility there. So with that being said, if you were to do 24.5, yes, it would mean that there would be that half increase. When you ask, are most electives 1 credit or half a credit, that's really interesting because even core credits, if you already have fulfilled that category, it can be an elective if you take something that's foundational in addition. Does that make sense? And so unless you're in a situation where you would need to take your electives fully online, or, you know, with our youth and care students, just in a particular setting, there is just a lot of opportunities to kind of mix and match with that. I haven't heard or experienced through going out to LEAs a situation where they're like, we don't have enough electives to be able to offer. That being said, you know, if your student body decreases, then your FTE decreases, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
so.
Okay. Board Member, or Vice Chair Wood, did you have a comment?
Oh, I'm just wondering, so would it be a problem if we didn't go to 24.5, if we just took line 323 and changed that electives to a 5.0 units of credit? Because that leaves, then allows the districts to continue doing what they're doing without having to, it just seems it merges this in nicely if we did that. But I don't know if there's a way that it would impact something greater that I'm not seeing.
That makes total sense. Parents really enjoy having their kids taking electives. We know that a lot of families are putting kids into their foundational courses online specifically so that their students can really interact with their peers in areas that their child is truly interested in and things like that. So there is no problem with reducing that in the elective area. That is the only area that I could think of that we could make that adjustment. So there are truly just, I don't even know if I'd say pros and cons. They're just two different viewpoints, and it would be up to the board to decide which one you would prefer.
Is there anywhere that it says in rule or law that we have 24 credits?
Yes.
Okay, so something has to be changed.
Something has to be changed. You either leave everything at 24, but then in your board rule, reduce your electives by half. But if you raise it to 24.5, there is going to be statute that needs to be changed.
Okay, well, I would move that we amend line 323 to 5.0 and see where that goes.
I'll second.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so the amendment that we have to this rule would be to change line 223. The electives would be to 5 units of credit. And they would, I don't know, maybe you kind of already spoke to it. So in essence, what would happen is if a district wanted additional credits, they would just mandate that within their own district. If they
That is
wanted to
correct.
maintain where they were on the elective piece.
Absolutely.
Okay. Is there further discussion to this?
Yeah, to speak to it, I think that gives the districts, they can stay the same if they need to, they can change, but it gives them the flexibility, but it also just puts us in a better space than having to go through legislature or legislation. Thank you.
And I guess, I do think that the big thing is that our alternative education programs, right? That this would impact them where they would now have to try to get one more half credit with students who are maybe trying to meet those. So that really would be an impactful thing, whereas a local district, they would have a little flexibility still within their own board. Okay. Are there additional comments to this? Seeing no comments, let's go ahead and make that, place that amendment. Did we get it written up? Okay, so the amendment to R277700 is that we amend line 323 to reduce elective credits to 5 units. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Okay, so that was unanimous. Are there additional questions to this particular rule? All right, if someone wanted to make a motion, I would be open to that. Okay, I'll have to sign you guys. You're the first one, you're the second, just kidding.
So then this motion.
Yes, as amended.
Oh, yeah, I'll
Yep.
make a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to I'll make a motion that the committee approve R277-700, the elementary and secondary school general core draft 1 as amended on first and reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion before the committee is that the committee approve R277-700, the elementary and secondary school general core, draft 1 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. All those in favor? Aye. I think that was unanimous. Oh, wait, hold on. Yeah, we've got 4 in favor and 1 abstention from Board Member Green. Okay, and our next item is R277-707, Enhancement for Accelerated Students Program. And it looks like, are you doing that as well?
So this is another continuation that we do not have substantive changes to, but we do need to have an amendment to add an oversight category of 3.
Okay, is there someone that would like to make that, board member would like to make the amendment to for our oversight category on that?
Okay.
Line 18.
It's over 2 lines. Let me return so it's all on the same page. It's easier to read.
Okay,
I'll go ahead and do that. I move that the committee amend R277-707, line 18, to add 3. This rule, R27777, is categorized as Category 3 as described in Rule R277111.
okay, any discussion to that amendment? All right, let's go ahead and do that amendment. Let me get my glasses on. So the amendment before the.
Actually, I do have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Why is this one a 3?
No, that's,
Sorry, say it one more
Why
time.
is this a Category 3?
That's a very good question that I would pass off to Superintendent Newby. But I believe it's the amount of oversight that it has.
It
so,
is,
yeah.
so we really, I guess, the gifted and talented.
and we have personnel assigned
It's the
to
assigned
it.
To
personnel,
those,
yeah.
assigned to that, okay, all right, yeah.
But
I just
the,
see that as so much
policy
more of an
advice-
LEA-driven with our gifted and talented, but I know there's the other section in there too, so, thank you.
Yeah, we have specific personnel, and I think we follow up on it too, right? On the components of it. Okay. All right. Is there discussion? Oh, Board Member Green, you have a, do we have a staff member if there's, for discussion, if there's questions? Are you the, it looks like it's Joanna Sorensen.
She's online.
Oh, she's online, okay. So if we have questions, Specialist Sorensen will help maybe facilitate that. So go ahead, Board Member Green.
Yeah, I'm actually just wondering a little bit about this program. How many apply for this, the Enhancement for Accelerated Students Program funding?
Good morning, Joanna Sorensen, Elementary Social Studies and Gifted and Talented Specialist, USBE. Board Member Green, every LEA in the state is eligible to apply. Not all of them do. I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but they're all eligible. And then with it, I know there were questions about reporting or collecting the information. So when they apply for the next year's funding, that's also when we collect the data from the previous year. So I think that is in regards to Board Member Wood's question about why it would be a Category 3. And then I compile that information into a report.
Sure, yeah, that would be great. And I think I'm also wondering how many, or what that process looks like for an LEA or a student or a parent that might identify their student with being gifted or talented. And, as I'm reading this rule, what does that look like?
Every LEA has its own procedure that's not directed by the state. So each LEA has its own measurement tools for identification that fall into the requirements put in the rule.
Did that
So is
answer
it-
that? Oh, go ahead.
No, is it triggered typically by a teacher seeing a student or a parent saying, my kid's awesome? Like what is that conversation?
All our kids are awesome,
No,
right?
of course, but we
Yeah.
have a whole rule towards, extra
Sure,
gifted
yeah.
students.
No, it could come from either. And then there are measures that different LEAs use to actually identify, and the particular area, because a child may be gifted and talented in mathematics, but not necessarily language arts. And so the measures used identify the particular areas that are either listed. It's a long,
Yeah, it is.
code, but yeah. So it could be triggered in any of those ways that you mentioned, and then the measurements are used to really pin down where the kid can and should be accelerated. And then the LEA or school moves from there to best serve the student. But it's a really interesting, I'm fairly new to this position, and it's been very interesting to learn how varied it is across the state, because every LEA has different sizes and different abilities to serve the students. So there are a lot of different ways that those supports look in Utah.
Do you feel like it adds a lot of burden to an LEA if they were to identify a student with that? And I mean, obviously, there's funds that go towards supporting that program and students with those abilities. Do you feel like they're not saying an LEA would do that, but I think, it could come into play if it adds more burden than what they would feel it would be worth, respectfully,
Yeah. Oh, no. No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah. Vice Chair Wood, you have a question or some comments?
Just a question. So I was looking at Kobe in terms of the funding source, and it's like 7.3 million appropriated for 2026. It looks like there's no lapsing. So does this go out for between what it costs for us to manage the program, and then is every other penny gone to the different LEAs? Is that how it works? That it's all to help them support the program? 'Cause that seems like a significant appropriation for this, 7.3 million.
I don't know. Does someone know that? So most of these, I guess the question, tell me if I'm wrong, is that we have a little bit of administrative costs associated with it. And is the rest of the funding distributed directly to the LEAs through the grant program? Joanna, do you know that?
Well, there's one there's one big funding source, and then there's a formula. It's divided up between EASP, which is K through 8, gifted and talented, and then the older students, which is, I believe, AP and IB. So EASP, the K-8 gifted and talented, get a portion of that funding, and that's distributed to the schools who serve kindergarten through 8th graders based on their October 1st enrollment. And then the rest of it is distributed with Christy Schreck oversees AP and IB, and they take care of that portion of it.
Okay. Any additional questions? Board Member Green.
Can I just extend maybe an ask or an invitation? I would love to have like an information item just to get to know this area. I think it would be
Okay.
informative and anyway, something that I'm interested in.
Can we put that on our list? June, I think, is going to be a heavy lift for us because we've got some curriculum things coming, but
Yeah,
maybe
just-
August or September?
Yeah, in the
Okay,
fall,
if you can
maybe.
put that in our
Gives
future
us some
list.
time.
I think I'd be interested too, just because I'm curious at the different metrics used by different districts across the state, and if I don't know if the word equitable is what I want to say, but it is kind of a little bit making sure we're using similar processes, or at least fair processes, right? Maybe looking at that a little bit. What is used, right? And kind of considering those, so.
And I've seen, we've had an email, this was like probably over a year ago, year and a half ago, though, we received an email even about a student that was gifted, and I believe in math, and so I know it's out there. Like, I know that this is a relevant
Okay.
subject that I don't know a lot about, and I'd like to.
Yep, sounds good. All right. I am looking for a motion then. If someone would be interested in doing that for us?
Did we finish the motion for the category? I think there was.
Did we not? Oh, maybe so. I thought we did, but maybe I'm wrong. Let's just do it to make sure. Safe, right? We could always go back and watch, but we'll just take care of it twice if we need to, or once if we didn't. Okay, so the motion or the amendment? Yeah, okay. So, I mean, the full thing. So Board Member Wood made a motion to amend, and the amendment is that the committee amend R277707, line 18, to add this rule, R277707, is categorized as Category 3, as described in Rule R277111. All those in favor? Aye, that was unanimous. And now I'm seeking a motion for the full rule.
Okay, I'll make a motion that the committee continue R277707 as amended, enhancement for accelerated student program, and forward to the board for approval.
Draft one, yep.
Draft
We
one.
got it. Okay, so the motion before the committee, any discussion to that? Did we do that okay? Okay. Okay, the motion is that the committee continue R277707, enhancement for accelerated student program, draft one, as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, that was unanimous. And we can move to 3.6, which is R277736, juvenile court or law enforcement notice and information dissemination. This is a continuation. And yes, we have our
We
policy
also
analyst.
need to add an oversight category to this as well. This is going to be a category 2.
Okay. All right. I'm seeking it. Someone would like to make that amendment? As soon as we get it up there. And then we will have a presentation about it. I would invite up, it's up there.
You just have to read the screen.
Okay, Board Member Rill.
I'd like to make a motion that the committee amend R277736, line 15, to add this rule, R277736, is categorized as Category 2, as described in Rule R277111.
Okay, any discussion to that? Okay, the amendment before the committee, or the motion before the committee, is that the committee amend R277736, line 15, to add this section 3. This rule, R277736, is categorized as a Category 2, as described in Rule R277111. Any, okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. And now let's, can we, I know it's a continuation. Do you want a little information? Or is someone ready for the motion? Okay, we'll have, Benji, do you want to, Benji Carrier? It's actually us, I don't know. Oh, okay. I'm like, well, who's presenting then? Are you tag teaming it? Perfect. Okay, our safety team is coming forward, so if you want to just share a little bit about the continuation, and then we'll ask some questions if we have them. Just the speak one. Yeah.
All right. Good morning. Rhett Larson, School Safety Center Coordinator for the Utah State Board of Education. And this rule came about from legislation that was passed in 2019, 53G8404, which states the state's board shall make rules governing the dissemination of information. And at that same time, just to give some context, we were also starting to have the conversation regarding threat assessment, multidisciplinary teams. And so what we did is we worked with the policy team at the time and the board in creating, when information that's sensitive about a student is shared to the administrator, that they utilize that multidisciplinary team so that team is aware and can help come together and think through resources to support that student. And so with some additional requirements from House Bill 40 this year, it asks us to further define the roles and responsibilities for multidisciplinary teams. So we've been working with Deputy Newey as well as the School Safety Center in collaboration with the State Security Chief, Chief Matt Pennington, on those new requirements from House Bill 40 and developing language that will be inputted into R277-400 that may or may not impact 736. And so that was why we made the recommendation, if you all agree, for the continuation, knowing that there may be some additional changes depending on what happens with 400. And my apologies, I sound like Kermit the Frog. I'm going on 4 months with no voice, or 4 weeks, so please forgive me. But I sound like Kermit the Frog. But anyway, so there's some context.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Let me just make sure I interpret it. What you're saying is, we're going to pass this rule because it needs the continuation, which is the 5-year, but there may be some more modifications coming depending on other rules and how we interpret those and how we, okay.
Yep.
All right, I think I heard it right then. Does anybody else have questions related to this? Okay, looking for a motion. Are we passing it down to the end or just?
Benchmark assessments incorporated document and move.
Oh, no, it's, sorry. It would be the 707, so whichever one's, is that the one that's,
Wrong one.
it's on the screen? Oh. Oh, it is 736, sorry, 736.
Oh, yeah, right there.
Just do your microphone.
Okay, let's try this again. I move that the committee continue R277736, Juvenile Court or Law Enforcement Notice and Information Dissemination, Draft 1 as amended, and forward to the board for approval.
Perfect. So any discussion to that? Okay, the motion before the committee is that the committee continue R277736, Juvenile Court or Law Enforcement Notice and Information Dissemination as Draft 1 as amended and forward to the board for approval. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. That was unanimous, so thank you. Your job was easy today. Oh, do you have a question?
I just wanted to ask a question, because I heard from several people within LEAs last year that they're wanting more teeth when it comes to school safety, like being able to hold students accountable for violent behavior. Is there any extra information we can take to legislators in interim for things that can strengthen what LEAs can do? They just said they feel like with discipline and things, their hands have been tied behind their back over the last few years, and they're not able to. And so I don't know if this is the time for that kind of question, but maybe just something to be thinking about if there's information we can take to legislators and be talking about what might need to be changed so that they feel like resource officers and people feel like they have action plans that they can work on, I guess.
And it could even be, if there are resources currently available, maybe districts are not aware of that, might be another thing, but go ahead if you have a comment there.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Chantal Cota, Director of School Safety and Student Services. A couple of things that we are working on is we're updating the definitions for disciplinary action. I think that's a big thing to consider, because when we went through that process, we talked to LEAs and we had some focus groups to help them understand the difference between like what the definition says and what is practically happening, so the practical application in the schools. And so we're creating resources based off of that information as well. Another thing to consider is having the conversations around the populations of students that may be causing disruption, because there are different ways to approach discipline when it comes to students that, for example, may be part of the SPED population or the Gen Ed population. So I think those are some things to consider as we're looking at that. And then we have a couple of things at the School Safety Center, including like the playbook and some resources that we're happy to reshare. Those that are not already subscribed to the School Safety newsletter, I think that's a really helpful one to kind of stay on top of, some of those latest resources. And then I know Rhett had a couple of things to share as well.
Yeah, I think it's critical that we continue to have conversations within this space. In addition to resources and conversations with the legislature, we've had conversations in this space, in this topic, even with our school safety and security specialists and our school safety and security directors. So in every school in the state of Utah, they have a school safety and security specialist, and every district and charter admin have a school safety and security director. And as we have our webinars and our trainings with them throughout the year, I think it's really imperative that we continue to emphasize each year, what does this look like? What are the resources? What can we do there? This has also been a topic of conversation with our conference planner. So every year for the next 5 years, we have a contract where we've hired Michelle Gay with Safe and Sound Schools in creating that conference for our school safety and security specialists and directors and others in the education area within Utah who want to come. If you can, I would highly recommend you come to our conference. It's really good. It's a national level conference, but that's also part of the conversation of how do we get that information, resources, and tools on how to help with support students, look at discipline, where are we with school safety, where are we and where do we need to go? And so we're looking at what's all of our avenues to disseminate that information. I probably gave you more than what you asked for, but that just helps give some clarity.
And then just one additional thing to add as we're talking about this rule here, that's really going to be an important conversation around those multidisciplinary teams, because you all will have the opportunity to define the roles of the multidisciplinary team, and part of that includes what interventions and supports are present for students, which can include that disciplinary piece as well. So just something to consider. So Vice Chair Britton, I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully it kind of paints a landscape of where we are and where we're hoping to go.
Okay, and I would just love continuing conversations if you see things in legislation that need to change. I was just reading through some the other day about restorative practices, and just the feedback that I'm getting from some of the LEAs, maybe especially in rural areas, is they don't feel like they can hold students accountable for bad acting. That things are written in such a way that, anyway, they just feel like students are getting away with things and there's no accountability. So they're just going, help. It was kind of the message I got a lot.
Okay. And I would say the LRBI manual, there are some components to that, and they actually took the new laws that were just passed, right? Put that language in there that does create, it talks about the multidisciplinary team and some other strong components in there, right, on how to measure behavior and the preventative piece. And the preventative piece, I think, is really where we need to get if we can prevent a student from going down a path or create mechanisms to assist them, right? Those interventions early prior to needing more restrictive type of things. So, if there are cases when we need that, and I think that those need to be available. So, okay, thank you. Thank you, good questions. So, and I think if you have anything that you wanted to send on to the committee related to this, I think that would be appreciated. So.
Tell us about your conference.
Oh, yeah, that's in June, right? Is that coming out? Yeah, okay. And I did go to that last year. I'll put a little plug into that. It was great. It was great information and a lot of, just great information. There's a lot there for safety on a variety of items. So if you guys are able to meet it or go, board members, I would strongly encourage you. Thank you. All right, our next item is R277406, Early Learning Program and Benchmark Assessments. This is the incorporated document, and I think there's a presentation on this. Is that right? All right, Specialist Clark is are you the lead on this one? Or we got a couple of people? She's got a multidisciplinary team for her.
Julie Clark, Literacy and Early Learning Coordinator for the Utah State Board of Education. So could you get the slides pulled up, Andrea? Okay. We thought kind of going through a little bit of background and history on how we came to our Science of Reading checklist and why we need this, why this incorporated document is included, and we need further information about it. So I think we're still waiting. It should be the second one in there. You're fine.
Those of you online, we're just letting you know, we're just waiting just a minute for a document to come up for the presentation. So you're wondering why it's, if you're wondering why it's quiet here.
While it's quiet, maybe I can just ask, when I was going through this in prep, I just had a couple questions. I wonder, who fills this document out? Is this filled out at a LEA level or at a school level by teachers?
So this is filled out, so we have, when instructional materials are submitted to our RIMS process to be reviewed by a committee, so that review committee uses this checklist, as well as LEAs also use it when adopting curriculum for English language arts for in the elementary space.
So it would be like the curriculum specialist for the LEA is the one that would be going through this?
Yeah,
Okay.
it would be at an LEA level.
One other thing I can add, Terry Davis, Curriculum Content Specialist. Publishers also look at that list and they will adjust materials to comply with the list so they can, their items can be sold here in the state of Utah.
And just one plug, is there any way to get cursive and handwriting back in our schools?
It is in our standards.
It is in our standards?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
because
it
none of
is.
my kids have gotten that in their elementary schools, so.
It is in our
is.
standards.
In third, starting at third grade, right?
Cursive for third grade, but manuscript
yeah.
in the
Okay.
younger grades.
All right.
You better call your district.
Yeah, I better find out about that.
Start to be the standards police, right?
Could you direct us to where that is? If it's
In the
easily-
standards,
Yeah.
it is,
If it's
let me,
easily accessible, like after the meeting or whatever.
Yeah, just send an
Yes.
email.
You forwarded
I was
it
like-
to us? No, you don't have to do it right now, but I was thinking actually.
yes, I will
would
show
that be
you
okay?
exactly where it's at, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, it's on that.
It is on now, okay. Okay, great. So we're gonna kind of go through, so if you could go to the next slide, Andrea, that would be great. Oh. Okay, so when SB 127 passed in the 22 general session, LEAs were required to adopt Science of Reading aligned curriculum for their Tier 1 and their intervention programs as advised by our Science of Reading panel. So that is, those are the codes that are there. So if you want to go to the next slide. And then further, it defines that the state board may collaborate with panel members to conduct periodic reviews of, you can see those other two things, but I kind of was just highlighting the pieces that deal with the curriculum and the checklist. So advise LEAs regarding the Science of Reading and the Science of Reading instruction, curriculum, and intervention programs. So that is the state board along with our Science of Reading panel members. So if you can go ahead and go to the next one. So in collaboration with our Science of Reading panel, we created a checklist, and it further defines in SB 127, this was added to kind of the assessment rule, code, that the instructional materials that are provided to students need to be evidence-informed for core instruction and evidence-based for intervention and supplemental instruction. And if you could go to the next slide. So then in another code, it defines what evidence-informed is. And so in code, it says that it is developed using high-quality research outside of a controlled setting in in the given field as the state board as the state board further defines. And as I know, the state board has not further defined evidence-informed, but this can also include strategies and activities with strong scientific basis, again, as the board further defines. But we have not defined evidence-informed any further than what this definition is. So if you could go to the next slide. So a science of reading checklist was created in order to help the review committee to be able to identify materials that are evidence-informed and align with the science of reading in all of the different categories, so the print concepts, phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary comprehension, and writing. And then this checklist is used when instructional materials are submitted through the RIMS process, as I mentioned earlier. And then LEAs are able to use this as well if they are reviewing their own instructional materials so that they can ensure that it aligns with the science of reading. Also, as Terry mentioned earlier, that the publishing companies also look at this. We have had instructional materials be submitted and they didn't align. That company took took the feedback that we did, they adjusted their curriculum, resubmitted as an appeal, and it did pass. So we have seen those situations where publishing companies are really paying attention to the science of reading and adjusting their materials to align with it. They're not just trying to pass it off. You know, they are seeing this, and it's not just Utah that has checklists and lists of curriculum. It is happening across the country. So these are things that these instructional materials and the publishing companies are really focusing on adjusting their materials to make sure that they align with what we need them to align with to instruct in literacy. If you can go ahead and go to the next slide. This checklist was incorporated into our 277406 in the April 2024 board meeting. So that was approved as, that's how it got into this board rule. Okay, and then if you can go to the next one. So that is for our evidence-informed core instructional materials. So we also had to ensure that materials for intervention were evidence-based. So evidence-based has this definition in code, and you can read through that. And then it was further defined in 406 that it means a strategy that is demonstrated has a demonstrated statistically significant effect on improving student outcomes. And so that was further defined. So when a publishing company submits an intervention materials to the state board, they have to go through the science of reading checklist that we already showed to make sure it's evidence informed, and then to make sure it's evidence based, we have an additional checklist that it goes through, and I think that is on the next slide. And this additional checklist, which I think is linked down in the bottom of the slide, sorry, down there, it's just an addition to it to make sure that there are studies that show that it has a 0.4 effect size or higher for those evidence-based materials for intervention, because we need our intervention materials to be stronger to support those students that need that additional materials. That was also approved in the April 2024 board meeting. So those are the two separate things that are in the incorporated documents in our 277406. And then if you can go to the next slide. And then we have the general rubric that Terry oversees, that when curriculum is submitted to the RIMS process, they also have to, we have a general rubric of additional codes that we have to ensure that instructional materials align to. Some of these pieces were not in our science of reading checklist. So there are three main sections of the general rubric: the compliance with state law, and I just kind of put a note in there that there are required state codes, and these were not included in our science of reading checklist. Then there's a content section where some of these are required state codes, and these are part of what is included in our science of reading checklist. And then there's the material characteristics that are not required by code and are not in our science of reading checklist. So just those three different sections. Does that make sense?
Sorry, I had a
Board Member
question.
Rill?
Well, I leaned over to member Wood and I said, what does RIMS stand for? Because I was like trying to remember, and then I was like, I feel like I know what it is, and now we just found it, okay.
And
I didn't want to
I was
interrupt,
going
I'm
to say,
sorry.
Terry can answer that one.
Yeah, it's a big database.
Did you have a
with all of that.
question then?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that was it? Okay, I'm actually, I do have a motion here, so I'm actually going to turn it over to Vice Chair Brinton to kind of run this piece, just so that it's not me running it and doing motion, but, and then it looks like Board Member, oh, nope, Board Member, turn the light out. Do you want, why don't you get your question answered first? Oh, okay.
Does that last slide that we were on, does that mean that we need to have, it says some things were on, but does that mean we need to work on that?
Yes, that's what we
Okay,
are bringing to you today. So on the next slide, as we continue on, so these are the pieces that are on the general rubric in the compliance section that were not on our science of reading checklist that we are looking to add to it so that when it is submitted, it's just one document instead of two separate ones. Is this making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we added these compliance pieces to our checklist just to ensure that we are following the code. So when those materials are submitted to us, that we make sure we're covering these pieces as well. And then if you want to go to the next slide, there in the general rubric, we needed to also add the ethnic studies piece and the shared values and character traits piece, because those were also not included in our science of reading checklist. And then if you want to go to the next slide, the material characteristics, these aren't required by code, and so we were not adding these to it, so that wasn't necessary to add to our checklist. So if you want to go to the next slide, thank you. So right now there are two separate checklists. There's the science of reading checklist and the general rubric that are required for Tier 1 instructional materials. And then there would be three for the Tier 2, Tier 3 instructional materials for our intervention. We have the science of reading checklist, the evidence-based checklist on top of it, and then the general rubric that we have. Okay, so if you go to the next one. So what we're trying to do is we are trying to combine those required pieces that were on the general rubric with our science of reading checklist to make one document for the Tier 1 instructional materials. The Tier 2 would still have the two because they have the evidence-based piece that we have to ensure as well. And then if you want to go to the next slide, I kind of put these out there as like some options. Jennifer kind of helped me with this. Some options that we could do, right? We could leave it as it is, and then the RIMS committee and LEAs would need to use the science of reading checklist and the general rubric separately. Or we could approve it with them combined and have the combined one that was in backup. So if you go through it down at the bottom, it has the general rubric pieces that were added. Or there's option 3, where you remove section 3 from R277406, where the checklist, the science of reading checklist and the evidence-based checklist are not incorporated in board rule anymore. So those are kind of 3 ways we could go.
Okay, go ahead.
So do we have anybody that wants to make a motion?
Well, I do have a motion. I was watching Board Member Carey do this, and I'm like, okay, if you're directing it, so I'm trying to negotiate that a little bit here, so, because I think there's some wisdom in that. I do have a motion I want to place, and then we can discuss it. So, and I think it kind of falls in line with what some of the suggestions that were here, and tell me where it doesn't. And I think in talking with some leadership that there was this confusion. Just help us know where you want us to go, right? And I think this even expands broader than just the reading, science of reading rubric, that in general, help us kind of facilitate where you want this to go. So this is the motion I would make, and it's intended to create clear direction for staff and to simplify the rubric creating process. So my motion is that discipline rubrics created and used by USBE shall use the general rubric as a supplemental accompanying document and should not duplicate duplicate rating items on a discipline rubric. Discipline rubrics including CTE courses, core courses, supplemental courses, or other resources where the items on the general rubric would be incorporated and used. Was that a complete sentence? Let's see, discipline rubrics including CTE courses. Okay, maybe does that work? I guess if anybody has do I need a little bit more at the end, or does it work? Okay. Okay, and I can speak to that. If there is a change to any law, and we start incorporating all these pieces into all these rubrics, right? Let's just say, I don't know, all of a sudden it's like you can't do anything over 5 pages, right? That law passed last year. Instead of putting in every rubric, we should have, and we do have, that general rubric that's gone through the board, and it should be used as a supplemental resource, so that science of reading, math, CTE, whatever the course is, you're able to stick to the discipline. What is the research around this particular, academic discipline? And then as a supplemental resource with that can be used too. And I know that maybe not everything is right. There may be, for example, you were saying like the very end of it, you were saying there were pieces that maybe didn't trail over, right? But this way, then if something's incorporated, also if we've got a motion somewhere that, yep, I've got my science of reading, and that we can use the incorporated, or the general rubric as a supplement. Now, I don't know if that adds complications. It just seems like the other fields, if you're only taking pieces, and when I went and looked at the other rubrics we have, it seems like we've taken some pieces that are legally required, but we'd almost have to move all those pieces over. And my only concern is that then if there's a change, then we have to go back through and change everything instead of keeping a concise general rubric. And if we need to change the general rubric and pull some things out for just structural, right, we could maybe do that. I don't know. That's my thoughts. So,
Do we have discussion?
I have a question, if that's all right. Chair Earl?
Yeah.
Or, sorry, Vice Chair Britton. I'm confused by this only because what is not included there then? Because discipline rubrics include CTE, core, supplemental, and other resources. So what would be not included in that? That just means that all of them are included, wouldn't it?
yeah. It would be, if we're creating a rubric, you can use this general rubric as a supplemental rubric to go with it.
Okay.
Did I miss one? Do we have other rubrics out there?
So each.
Yeah.
Terry, do you want to go? She might be able to explain
Okay.
it better.
So what we've done with the general rubric is we created a guideline rubric that has the mandatory pieces in it. And then each content area created their own specific one off of the general one. So the structure would be somewhat the same. And then those rubrics are put into RIMS in that certain structure, because we can't change the process of how RIMS look unless we put a whole bunch of money into the design of Midas. So anyway, but it's easy to be able to take the code items and change them in and out of the rubrics in RIMS, but then also on that. So if each content area just took the law pieces, which isn't very many, it's like the 4 from the top and then 2 ethnic studies portions, that's pretty easy to change. And we can just edit those very quickly. But I'm a little worried about having one document and then having it with another document, just because I think it would create a lot of confusion. Well, which document are you using for grading? It would create confusion with reviewers along with publishers, because publishers really lean on those documents. And so when they go in for the content specific, it's easier for them and everybody to be able to know which document they're using, and they don't have to use multiple ones. Also, we have created documents to make the reviewing process easier for our review teams. And so if there's multiple documents, that is really going to complicate how we review from the reviewer side, how publishers look at it, because they'll have the science of reading checklist, but then the general rubric has the general categories, but I really like how the content areas really drill down into what they're asking for, which the general rubric doesn't really do.
So it's not necessarily this idea, it's more just like a practical implementation of doing this.
Yeah.
Like just the process piece of it, not
Yeah.
like the idea of doing it, but just like we're making the process more convoluted and a little bit more confusing for the folks involved.
I think so if you added a whole document. If you took the pieces, those are easy to slide in and out of the rubrics as we need to. So, you know, we can just hit delete. But if we, or an edit, but if we add two documents, then we'll be going back and forth. And then we have to change, because in our trainings, then we'll have to train each content review team of, you know, them finding the information. So
So I'm trying to understand, but wouldn't you already, if you're adding in, these are the components, that's why it's supplemental, right? You've got these components, and then you would add the components from the general rubric below.
we have some just general ones that the science of reading gets more granular in those general areas. And so that's where they would be like, well, are we following this, or are we following this general one, this more general? And it would be really nice for publishers to say, no, this is what you're doing, instead of, well, we went with this one instead of this one, and then you have a whole bunch of conversations surrounding, well, which one is it? Well, it's both, but, you know, this category is not as detailed as what we have on this checklist. So having multiple checklists.
Don't we already have both? Regardless, let's put the general rubric aside. We already have both. And is it confusing for them to do both already? Because we have two science of reading checklists, and I understand they can encompass two items, right? So we already have both, and are they able to manage that or not?
Yes, when they're looking for what type of material they're submitting, they'll know which rubric to use.
Okay.
So they'll be able to pick. But right now, because we were in the process of updating every content rubric for every content area, not all rubrics are complete and in the system yet. And so that's why we needed the approval of the board for the general structure of the rubric encompassing those coded areas. And then we took that and we're applying that to all the content areas. So some of the content areas are done and we have the rubrics in RIMS, but not all content areas have taken those specific areas that we worked on and were board approved. They haven't put those in yet.
Which is the general rubric. So that's why I'm having it, I guess I'm still a little confused why this is more cumbersome. If you've got the rubric for the discipline and you're incorporating in at the bottom, right? Because it can be used as the general rubric.
They're taking out the pieces
So they're
that
picking
don't.
and choosing which pieces they want?
Yes, but we have the required pieces that every rubric, and those are the pieces that we worked on. So those required at the top of the rubric, the compliance with state law, those are the pieces that they have to be in every rubric. And then the ethnic studies and the shared values and character traits, that section needs to be in every rubric. But the rest of those rubrics are content-specific, according to their standards and practices and things like that. And professional guidelines.
I guess my thinking is they shouldn't have to think about the required portions when our content specialists are putting together their rubric. They should be thinking about what does the content need to be for this particular, right, for math, whatever, right, reading. They should be able to do that. And then I guess maybe I'm not seeing a difference between this recommendation. This is broadening it out, saying you can use this as a supplement, right? And then we're not having to,
Member Earl,
Yeah.
it sounds like it's really just like, truly like a process. It's not like the concept, it's just the work behind making it more broad with your motion is just more of a burden and more of a complicated process for the actual application of the reviewers and the publishers going through the process.
okay.
So it's not the idea, it's like just literally like the practical implementation of what this would bring from a staff side sounds. That's what I'm gathering is that it would be.
So do we need a date on it?
I'm just like,
Pushing it out 6
generally
months.
like, and well, generally for me, like, I mean, when it comes to the decisions like this, if the result impacts staff in a way that like will be more work or change the process or add another layer that complicates things, like I generally tend to like, because I'm not the one doing the back end work of organizing and training all of these reviewers and working with the publishers, and so for me, I just, whatever can make it easy for them, if we still can get what you would like from these rubrics. Process from the staff's perspective is, I don't want to complicate their work.
Could I add, just maybe
Yeah.
this will help clarify? So up on the screen, Andrea's got pulled up our science of reading checklist. So Andrea, if you can scroll down. So these are this is our checklist that we have that was approved and is incorporated into this document, into this rule. So, and if you keep scrolling down, sorry, go all the way to the, like, go clear to the bottom. So this is all still part of our science of reading checklist, just because we are very detailed about what can and can't be in there. Okay, and then the next page should be where we are, okay, that's interpreting results. And then this is where we have added, okay, right there. This is where we've taken those required pieces of the general rubric and added them to our science of reading checklist already, so that they would only have one document instead of two separate ones, kind of like what you're saying. These are the supplemental pieces that we needed, that we just added into this. The reason why we brought this to you is because if we were changing what was already approved in board rule. Does that make sense?
I understand why it's coming, because it's an incorporated document.
Yeah,
Make any modifications, it's got to come to us.
If we make changes, we have
Yeah.
to bring it to you. But this is what each of the content areas are doing as well. They're taking what they are looking for in instructional materials, and then they're adding those required pieces to theirs as well. And then all of this gets submitted into RIMS. So our checklist, all of those pieces of the checklist are digitized into RIMS, and that's where that's where publishers and people see them.
I understand,
Yeah.
I think I understand what you're saying, is
Yeah.
that you can't really use it unless we put it into the incorporated document, right?
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Okay, and I
Or-
guess mine
or
is
if
a
they're
broader
left-
discussion perhaps, and I think it's giving that flexibility there, but if we need to be more specific for this item, and I'm just gonna, look, I just pulled up the fine arts content rubric, and I'm looking down the side of it, right? And it's bias-free, cultural awareness, inclusive component, shared values and character traits, physical characteristic, technical, adaptability, alignment, scaffolding, navigation, instructional support, assessments, and supplemental resources. There's a lot of stuff there that's already in the general rubric. But I also I don't see, and this is speaking to the reason why I'm making this broader motion, I also don't see the components that are in the general rubric. They're not in here. We updated this last year, and I guess maybe you're updating it?
Yes.
So I guess the question.
We started into the updating
Yeah.
system, updating process, and then we had to stop because
We needed the general rubric,
Yeah,
right?
we needed it to help us approve the general rubric. So now we're going back
So
to
it's,
take those elements
yeah,
to put.
so to me, it's still work. So that was the question is, don't create more work, but I think it's creating clarity. And maybe I'm right, and maybe I understand what you're saying now, right? That you're approving this, so there's components that we need to approve because we can't use unless it's in the incorporated document.
Yeah.
Okay, I see that clarity there.
Yeah.
And I guess the broader discussion, so maybe there needs to be two motions here, is that, because I'm looking at this recently updated one, that is still gonna need to be worked on because it doesn't incorporate the required components from the general rubric. So maybe the motion needs to be altered a little bit. Is that what I'm understanding? Maybe no one's following me. So Leanne's like, nope, I'm not following you.
Chair Earl,
It's not, the point is that the rubrics that are sitting on our document are not current.
Right.
And they're not really usable based on what we've already approved, but we don't have to duplicate the work because we already have the general rubric. And we don't, yeah.
Except for, we have all of these old ones that haven't been updated with the codes and everything. And so we have to do that anyway. So once we get everything updated, it should be great for a long period of time. And there might be a few adjustments here and there, but the content area people were very excited to be able to create a rubric specific for their area. And so most of the rubrics are mostly like this, the general one, except for they will have additions or subtractions as they need them. And it's okay. Once we get through this hump of updating things will be so much clearer for everyone that I feel like this is a big lift, but it's well worth the effort of doing it.
Oh, well,
Comments or questions?
Questions? So, when I saw the rubric that you sent us, it seemed like, okay, we had this, we put them together, and that's what you're asking for. I read this motion, and it's saying, we have this, and you're saying we have to keep them separate. Is that what your motion is saying? But they will go along with each other. And you're saying when we go in, we want them to go here and here, here and here, whether it's math, whether it's reading. You just would like to take this and put this together because it will be easier for everyone. So what is the value in your motion?
there's great value in my motion because when you go look at all the rubrics, these guys have to bring it because it's incorporated document. But the rubrics on USB's site don't have to incorporate that. They can pick and choose. So in having discussion with some leadership people, it was, well, there needs to be clarity for staff onto what to do. So once again, I pulled up the science one. Now, I don't know, maybe you're updating the science one or it's been updated. But I could read down this and it doesn't incorporate the requirements of the general rubric that are required in law in here. I don't know.
Yes, we're incorporating everything right now as we speak. But I've been having to go through each specific rubric and collaborate with each content area to get those required things moved into their rubrics. So we're working on that. We should be done with all of that updating. My hope is by July.
And if I may, Chair, I can speak a little bit. As Molly Basham, Early Learning Mathematics Specialist, as one of those content specialists, part of the reason that it has taken us a little bit of time to get some of our rubrics updated is some of them were put on the website years ago, and we either did not have original drafts of the document, or they were put up at a time when having ADA compliant documents wasn't the norm in the agency. So it has taken us a little while in some circumstances to take the existing rubric, make sure it is still up to date and in line with research and best practice, put it in a format that is ADA compliant and includes those components that are required in law. So that is part of why some content areas have been updated and some are still in the process.
Okay, I have a question to the maker of the motion. So, because I'm trying to understand this as well.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying here, we have our general rubric, which is this document over here. And that encompasses the law, the things that we have to be aware of on that level. And that stays the same? Does that document stay the same regardless of what discipline rubric it's associated with?
I think that was the intent is that the required pieces are used in all the other rubrics, and we're not picking and choosing pieces from the requirements. Because that's what once again, I went on what we had on our site, right? Looked at the work we had, and it just seems like some of those had pieces incorporated, but not the full requirement. So the intent is to make sure that if you can't pick and choose which pieces of law we want to incorporate in a rubric. So if it doesn't say that, then I'm open to, what needs to be done
So
there.
you're saying that the discipline rubrics will change, they're not going, they will be applied to the discipline, like reading, science, fine arts, right?
Yeah.
That has its own rubric, and we develop what it is we want the curriculum, the people applying for that would look at. And then with that, we have our general rubric that says, by the way, in the state of Utah, you have to align to these things. So you want those two separate documents.
Whether they're two separate or they're together,
Yeah.
I guess doesn't really matter. It's just that it shouldn't be picking and choosing off of one.
If we were to, and maybe those are separate right now, but we're starting to incorporate those. Is that correct?
So with the general rubric, there's pieces that are required, but there are pieces that are not required, that are examples of good teaching practices. And so what we want each content area to do is absolutely take the required ones, the mandatory ones, and put into their rubric. And then they can build the professional practices, teaching practices, and standards into their specific rubric. So
Would that fall underneath, I'm just trying to sort this out, would that fall underneath the discipline rubric? So the
Yeah.
absolute must is implying that this would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jenny, that this is the, general rubric. So the first part of what you said would fall underneath a general rubric. And then the other becomes the disciplinary rubrics, or the discipline rubrics, that start listing out specifically what we want the teachers in each of those disciplines to do. And
I think we might be saying something very similar.
I actually think we all are. I think that the second option, approve the combined science of reading and general rubrics, would be what you're wanting and also what would be most beneficial as they start to combine all these and update all of the rubrics. It seems like that route is the best one, because I think that's good. It covers what you're looking for in your motion, now that you've learned that they're updating it. That was just.
Well, I knew this piece was, but it
feels like knowing that they're in the process of updating it through July, and the web piece and how that can be complicated too as well. But having them combined and approving the combined checklist with the additional piece of the rubric would do what you're asking and also be better for them on their end, a staff's end. It seems like, that's what I'm engaging.
Well,
It feels like we all kind of
I just
are
want
agreeance.
to, once again, there was this question of clarity for staff. That was what the question came up to me. Staff just want clarity. So the intent here is to create that clarity and maybe it needs to say the general rubric, it's the required components from the general rubric. Maybe there's something, right, that would create a clarity there, because I think what you're saying is there's pieces of that may not always translate over. It's just, once again, a general rubric, but there are the requirement pieces. So if I'm understanding that right, the things that you pulled over into your recommendation are the requirement pieces.
Yes.
So then it would be translated as one document, but it would have those components separate. I guess with my concern is I want our content specialists to be true to the content.
Yes.
And then also take into consideration the requirements of law. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But I don't want the requirements to law to only be the only focus in the, right, in their discipline area, right, in their content area.
Yes. And sorry, I sent Andrea the general rubric so you can kind of see the whole, like, just a refresher on what that looks like. So that top section there, that compliance, sorry, I can't read over there. Compliance with state law, that is all required. That's what we added in. And then if you go to the next section that says content, so this is all very general that could be applied to any content, right? Well, this is where we took that out, and that's where our science of reading checklist would replace this piece because
it's not the required components.
right,
So what
it's
if
not
we,
required,
Okay.
you know, and ours is specific to the science of reading. Molly's would be specific to math. So that section we kind of take out because we don't need to fill that out. That's covered by our content area
Gotcha.
where we want it to be specific for our content. And then if you keep going down just a little bit, down at the bottom of that content section is the ethnic studies portion. Oh, I think it's right there. The ethnic studies portion, that is also required. So we do have that added into our science of reading checklist because that wasn't in part of our science of reading. We weren't looking at that when we were going through. So that piece we did add to the checklist as well. So in that content area, that's the section that we added in. The rest of the content is specific to science of reading.
so what if we did this? Discipline or content, I don't know if you want to put content, is that better than, okay,
Yes.
content what? Just content? Content-specific rubrics, that's good.
Yeah.
Created and used by USBE shall use the required components of the general rubric, but we wouldn't need that as a supplemental accompanying document, right?
No, I think if you took that piece out, that would help us because then we could just put it with our content.
Yeah, so if we took that out, the rest of that works. Am I correct on that? Okay, and that's kind of the hangup here is that it's like you were saying, there's the two pieces and and I think the key thing is that we don't want to duplicate, like you put something up here and then we put it down in the general rubric, right? We don't want that duplicate. There's no need to do that.
Right.
Is it shall use or shall include, so that there can be merged? Content-specific rubric created and used by USB shall include the required components of the general rubric. Should not duplicate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is this right on a content-specific course? But this should be rubric, shouldn't it?
I think so. General rubric, is that what you're asking, or at the bottom?
It should be rubric.
Oh, at the bottom there, let's say contents. Yes, yeah, yep. Okay, does that, yeah?
Make sense?
I don't know.
That's clear.
And then that would incorporate, if I'm understanding, that works for what you recommended. Am I right on that? Okay.
Okay, so can I ask a question?
Yeah. You can try.
Okay, so we just deleted supplemental, I think I was hung up on that. So the supplemental implied that they were two separate documents. Now it seems that this might be reading as this, and I'm using visuals here because I lack the words. Is that what you wanted, or did you want two separate? Because I feel like it's reading completely different now.
My understanding, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because I do think truly it is supplemental. Not supplemental as in optional, but supplemental is in not woven through. So I guess the point is if next year there is a change to law, what does that look like for you guys? If you keep that separate in your rubric criteria. Does that make sense? Like, these are the, I guess just to make sure we're clear, because I think that's a good question. Content-specific information, required information maybe at the bottom, right? Or vice versa at the top, right? Either way, but it's not woven between, so that if we had to make a change to law in a year,
Put it at the bottom.
then it's,
Just add it to the
you
bottom.
can go in and alter that.
Yes.
But it's kept as, these are the required components.
Is that what you were looking for?
Well, I just want to,
Like,
personally, I just wanted to make sure it was clear, right? That we're keeping this congruent with the content and this congruent with the requirements. So that was a separate piece, but it sounds to me like it's got to almost be, in order to be approved, it's got to be
Yeah.
this added to this, right?
And if not, and maybe this will help, if they were left separate, so all of that stuff in the general rubric that is content specific, that's in the content area that's very general, that would have to be filled out also. Does that make sense? So it would be, does that make sense? It's more work. So they're doing the content one, and then they go to the general rubric, and they have another content section that's just very broad and general. That isn't required, but it's on that rubric, so it would be filled out. Does that make sense? It just-
Maybe a little bit. It sounds to me like it's,
We're trying to simplify it.
that the
because-
procedures are what, the
Yeah.
process of doing it.
Yes.
Well, and it's.
Yeah, but it doesn't, to me, it's the same thing. Like, these are two separate pieces, right? This one could be modified according to what the law says, and this one could be modified according to what, I mean, and I still don't see it, I mean, I don't think it's necessary to, like, I guess we can, if you're putting the document in, you'd put this in, and then you would start a new one, right? I don't know how it works, but you wouldn't type this in and then go over and type a new thing in. I would think you would do this and this because it's part of the rubrics that we use, but maybe not.
So in RIMS, we can put sections in that is all in one evaluation. But publishers would, the way the system is set up is that you can't have two separate rating systems for one material. And so the way the process works, it would behoove us to have it listed as a section to a rubric, the required parts, instead of a whole different document.
And I guess that's my point, is that you wouldn't have to list it. Anything that was rubric would sit under that section, and you may have more than one section. So that's why, I guess,
Yeah.
in my view, it doesn't matter if it's a separate document or not, except for you just wanted the required pieces.
Yeah, we just want the required pieces like in a section.
But in the case of an incorporated document, you can't use it if it's not been okayed by the well, you'd have to though, because it's required by
Yeah.
law. Yeah. So it is a contradiction of law, right? Because it would be saying, oh yeah, you could use both, but then the one isn't approved by the board, so it's saying we can't unless it's approved by the board. Right, under the incorporated document. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if that created.
It's like a technical issue, not
Yeah.
necessarily what you want it to be.
Can I ask about the last part, or other resources where the items on the general rubric would be incorporated and used? Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, if we have other resources where we're using rubrics, we need to make sure we're using the general rubric. If we're incorporating, are there other areas we're using the general rubric pieces?
Well, we're using it through every content area. So if you look at every subject, the general rubric, they're taking the required pieces out, and then they're creating their own. So other than, I can't think of, we will have to look at creating a rubric if we have to dive into that area of packets.
So, yeah, it sounds like that could be something there. I don't know, did that create clarity? Are we still?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess, so I still go back to, of all three options, the second one seems like the best option rather than this.
No, I would go with this. Good try, because I want, here's what happened. I want to make sure that it's clear for staff on what we're doing. And if we have a question and we're like, actually, this is, we've set up a standard for how to do this, then we don't have to keep going back and say, okay, would you bring that rubric forward now? We're curious about that, right? We don't have to keep doing that because we've already set a standard for it. If there needs to be more to the standard or we need to adjust this in some way, then I think now's the time to do it.
Maybe, if I'm understanding correctly, it sounds like this motion provides guidance to staff, but it's not necessarily
Nope,
going.
we would
in a
have to
rule.
make the motion related to the incorporated document as well.
Yes, that would be after this.
Yes.
Yes, and but this is giving
It's a general-
guidance, and this is how staff is to operate when we're creating our rubrics and working towards it.
Can I just ask to staff, does this feel like it hits the mark on giving you clearer guidance? Or are there changes that,
This to me sounds like the work that we're doing already.
Which is great, right? Because then there's not that ambiguous, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
But this allows number 2, right? This allows to approve the combined science of reading and the general rubric.
No, I think we have to do another motion
we'll
to
do one
approve
more
that.
motion after this?
To approve that, but
Yes.
it allows it.
Yes, yes,
This allows it.
Yes,
That's all
yes,
I'm asking.
yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I would just restate the motion.
yeah, yes.
Okay, so we're making a motion to direct staff that content-specific rubrics created and used by USBE shall include the required components of the general rubric and should not duplicate rating items on a content-specific rubric or other resources where the items on the general rubric would be incorporated and used. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. And
Then you can ask if there's another motion.
now, is there another motion?
So can I move to approve the combined SOR and general rubrics?
So there's
Is
a
that your
motion
To approve.
to approve the combined SOR and general rubrics. All in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. And do I turn the time back over to Chair
You want to
Earl?
keep going, or you want me
No,
to?
go ahead.
Okay. I think that, so that takes care of item number 3.7.
Yep.
So we'll go to 3.8.
Which
Right?
is still us.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so this is an action on R277406, early learning program and benchmark assessments. And while it is the incorporated document we talked about, there's more changes, so if you wanted to address those more changes. And then we can ask some questions after that.
Do you want to go?
Need to do the motion to combine.
What's that? Yeah.
Jennifer, do you want to go, or do you want me to go? Okay, okay, okay. With R277406, we had some changes to code that which then required us to make some changes into our board rule. One thing that we noted that we needed to do with this board rule is we needed to add the oversight category, so I believe that was added to be a category 3. Some things that were changed in code were down, lines 48, 148, okay, get way down there. I'm gonna have to pull out my glasses. Sorry, my old people eyes. Okay, so we, the first part is that we are changing that we don't need to pre-approve any plans anymore. They are just submitted to us for, what was that? Just for approval. For approval. So we just took out the pre-approval piece of that and changed the date to when they are due to August 1st because they don't need to have that pre-approval anymore. the requirement of needing board approval, their local board approval was removed. So we did change some language on 157 that they shall present their plan in an open and public board meeting and also report on the outcomes from the previous year. So we added that piece in to that they are reporting out how they are doing on their plan, their early learning plan. And then if you keep going down, we also changed that if any changes needed to be made, they still don't need approval for. And then the other piece is that they entered the system of support after 1 year of not meeting their goals instead of 2 years. So those are things that were changed in code that we changed in board rule.
If I may add as well, on lines 173 to 174, we struck out the language about LEAs needing to report, their plans being reported on a digital reporting platform, because that was also struck from code.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you. So those are the changes.
So how are they reporting them to us? If not a digital platform, are we emailing each other the documents?
So LEAs are still required, based on a assessment code, to submit their assessment results on Acadience Math and Acadience Reading in the data management system that goes along with those assessments. So that data is still all being reported to USBE. We are in the process right now of updating the structure of the early learning plan that every elementary LEA submits. And within that structure, we are building in an assurance that they will report back to us, that we will send out a follow-up feedback survey at the end of the year for them to report whether or not they have or have not met those goals.
Okay. Are there additional questions from the committee? Okay, and we just more or less aligned with what the changes were this year, right? That's what it looked like to me. I didn't know if there was any other modifications. Okay, I'm looking for a motion.
Okay, I will make a motion that, is it right on? That the committee approve R277408, draft 1 on
406.
406, draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
And this one we didn't have to add okay. Perfect. Okay, I don't see any other comments here. Okay, so the motion before, the recommended motion is that the committee approve R277406 Early Learning Program Assessments, Draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. And you guys are off. Now you can go to lunch, do something special.
We still need Julie, actually.
Oh, just teasing. Oh, yeah, sorry, I skipped down to the accountability one. Okay, so 3.9 action is R277236, Early Learning Professional Learning Grant Program. And who are we turning this over to?
I'll start it out and then pass over
Okay,
questions to Julie. So essentially, this rule needs to change completely because the professional learning grant is no longer funded. So this will now have a new name. It will just be Early Learning Coaches. So that's the biggest change in there. We're removing all of the language regarding the grant. We also do need to make an amendment, which is on the board. So in lines 115 and 116, it references the Center for Strategic Improvement, which is a carryover. We no longer have that center in operation, so we will need to strike those lines.
Okay, so you're looking amendment for that then?
Yeah.
All right.
Also,
Go
sorry.
ahead and
really-
speak and then we'll.
Yeah, one more amendment that is down in the coaches piece, on line 107, we are striking the KEEP assessment because it's no longer required for LEAs to take the KEEP assessment. So when we are deciding where our coaches are going to be placed, we will not be looking at KEEP data anymore because not everybody is using the KEEP assessment, so.
Okay.
And the rest of it is basically the code was repealed, so it doesn't exist anymore.
Are you gonna make the motion to remove?
That
It's
is
16, okay.
the whole top the whole top lines. There are lines 9 through 11 that needed to be struck, 15 through 18. The KEEP assessment, it is, the KEEP assessment, it should be already struck in the draft, in the draft.
May prioritize.
11 is struck.
Yeah.
15 through
We don't need a motion.
Well, we do need an amendment for the
yes.
Center for Strategic Improvement.
Yeah.
And does that need to be changed or just stricken?
That just needs to be stricken. It's no longer in existence.
Not receive support. Oh, that, both of those lines, right? So 115 and 116? Okay, I was just
Yeah.
thinking the name, and I'm like, well, then what are you going to put there? But
There's
I see
nothing
what you're
there.
saying.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking you were yeah, never mind. It
Okay.
doesn't matter. Okay, go ahead, yes, board member.
I will do that, but before, I will tell you, I cried a little reading this rule because we did beg for this funding to stay over and over for these grants. Every member of EAC that I met with, I was like, here's what these grants do for our elementary schools. So,
We also cried. We still cry.
yeah, yeah, I know it impacts you more than it will impact me. It will impact our students and our,
It's our students and the support for our teachers that.
yeah, exactly. But I will move to strike lines 115 and 116.
Okay, there is an amendment before the committee, and that's to strike line 115, 116, which reads, "The superintendent may prioritize services under this program to schools who do not receive support from the Center for Strategic Improvement." Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. That passes unanimously. And then I just have I have a little question. I mean, it's a little bit leaning into this. We don't have grant money for this. We still have personnel though, right? Do we still have the reading, not coaches?
Yes, the coaches, yes, that is part of the
Okay.
funding that we get that was tied to SB 127. So that was separate
Okay,
and
okay.
not related.
The reading coaches are still there. There is no personnel related to math. So there is
Yeah,
no
yeah.
funding coming from us in the early math space.
Okay, yep,
The title of the rule will just be early learning coaches at this point.
yep, okay.
Yep.
Early literacy coaches, right?
Yeah.
So instead of that, okay. All right.
Should that say early learning literacy coaches?
We can
It
amend
should
that.
be early literacy coaches, not early learning coaches,
We'll
because they
amend
are
that.
specific to literacy with,
All right, I move to amend line 2 to read early literacy coaches.
Line 2. Oh, yep.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So the title of it will need to change. Okay, so, the amendment is to change early learning coaches to early literacy coaches on line 2. All those in favor? Aye. That was unanimous, although we probably could have just said, make that change. But we did it officially. So, okay. Any other discussion to this particular? Okay, to this particular item? All right, I'm looking for a motion.
Bullies on the board. I make a motion that the committee continue R277326, early literacy.
Sorry, that's it. That's it.
Literacy coaches. Draft 1 is amended on the first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay, I don't have that written right. Okay, got it. Okay, so the motion before, do you have a comment or question? Okay, the motion before the committee is that the committee continue R277236, early literacy coaches as amended on, draft 1 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. All those in favor? Aye. I think that passed unanimously. I didn't see. Are you a yes? Okay, sorry. Sarah's in your, just lean them forward enough. I can't see when you say so. Okay, that's it. Now you can go to lunch. Thank you. We're looking at action item number, or 3.10, and this is school counselors to student ratio report. And I think we have Chris Ann Lewis and Bethany Marker. Okay. All right. If you want to maybe give us just an introduction and some information about this, and then we can discuss the two entities that we've asked for a corrective action plan on this. So.
Bethany
Hi, can you guys see me or hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
Okay.
Hey, I turned my video on. Let's.
Is also here.
We see you now.
Oh, good.
There you go.
Okay, great. Oh, good. Chris Ann got there. So we're going between law and licensing and standards today. We have rules in both. So Chris Ann, do you want to speak to it or do you want me to speak to it?
Bethany, go ahead. I'm just here to support.
Okay, so in our board rules for school counseling ratios, we do have an annual ratio report that we report out to the board. And in our board rule, it is that school counselors will have a ratio of 1 to 350 students. We do have 2 schools or LEAs who were not meeting that ratio. It is done by the LEA level, and that was Box Elder and, goodness, sorry, I have too many screens up.
Syracuse Academy. Yeah, all right.
And Syracuse, yes, yes. And so both of them wrote, submitted an action plan on how they will get into compliance. And those action plans are submitted in the backup documents for you to review. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
By chance, or either one of those entities are not here, is that right?
Right.
Okay. All right. I think Vice Chair Wood has some questions to ask.
Yes.
So our rule requires 1 to 350. Is that correct?
In grades 7 through 12, yes.
Looking at the plan, it appears that even, well, with the Box Elder, it still does not get them to their current plan. How do we address that? If we were to move forward and approve this, we basically are saying, well, you're close to it, but you didn't get there. Do we do that with other schools or LEAs?
So in the board rule, that's a great question. Can I answer, Chair?
Yes, please.
So in the board rule, it does state that LEAs can be within a 0.25 school counselor off of the ratio. So Box Elder should be meeting that with the 0.25, what do we call that? A 0.25 give me extension. And so with that, they should be meeting that ratio.
Okay, that's super helpful.
Yeah, that is.
Again, on Syracuse Arts Academy, they didn't give us what their ratio will be once, or at least in backup, we did not have any numbers. They told us what they were going to do, but it doesn't give us an outcome. Do you have additional information for us?
I don't. That's what they submitted, and so I just submitted what they submitted. So I'm happy to, if you would like me to follow through with that, I'm happy to do that, but I just submitted what they submitted for that.
All right, so Chair, I would move to approve the Box Elder plan and request additional information from the Syracuse Arts Academy as to what their ratios will be once they implement the plan as they've provided for us.
There's no plan.
There is a plan.
Yeah, what does that mean, 0.2? Can we translate that?
Yeah, what the question
Well,
is,
no, but the
if they're going to add a 0.2, can you help us figure out how that makes a whole person? And I mean, I kind of know how it works, but do you want to just articulate it so we understand?
Are you talking to me?
Sorry, Bethany. Yes, we're trying to understand how you can add a 0.2 and count it as a counselor.
So I think they're trying to maybe hire an intern for part-time of a part-time or something like that. A 0.2 is difficult. Generally, we don't go less than like a 0.25, which would be a part-time intern of a part-time counseling position. That's how I'm interpreting that. But again, I don't have their exact, I just have what they submitted and then I submitted.
Could it be, I'm just throwing this out there, that they have someone who is qualified as a counselor, but also maybe administrative? So a quarter of their responsibility. Could that be also a possibility or not?
Yes.
Okay.
And we have had that happen, yeah, in some rurals. Some of our rurals have a part-time who's a
I see.
part-time counselor and part-time administrator.
Okay, so we're at, my understanding, Vice Chair Wood, if I understand you, you're wanting to know exactly what how they're going to implement it and a little more detail. Okay? So I do have a question for the committee. Is this something you want back to committee, or is it we want the information before it goes to the board? Because we could move this forward, but say this won't pass the board if we don't have additional information. And then that information would be provided to the committee in the next week, committee members. That's one way to do this too. Does that sound, is that something you think is doable? That we could get that information out to them, that we need additional detail for this particular entity? I don't know who sends that out. Is that?
I send it out. It did take some time. It took a few weeks for me to get this, but if we need that, I can definitely call and reach out and say the board is requesting that within this week, or the committee's requesting that, and then we could have that and back up for June.
Okay. It sounds to me like Vice Chair Wood would like it that one to just come back. And I think, do you see any problems time-wise? I'm just looking at time-wise with them putting in, having to budget
We
and
do
stuff.
have to have this done by, we do have to have this done by July. So that's why we do May and then June. So we are on, we do need to get this before the next school year.
No, it'd have to go full board and.
Okay, so do you want it to stay like this? Do you want the motion to stay like this?
Do we need to clarify that this will go to the full board, that both schools will go to the full board for approval? So we're recommending that the committee approves the Box Elder School District Plan and moves that forward to the full board for approval, but requests additional details from the Syracuse Arts Academy to go before approval by the full board.
Yeah. Okay, so it looks like, any additional questions before we move this from the committee? Okay, so the motion then, and I guess that would replace the motion that's on here then, right? We don't have, okay. So the motion before the committee is that let's see. Board Member Wood moves to approve the Box Elder School District Plan and to request additional detail from Syracuse Arts Academy regarding how they will meet the requirement. Both plans will go to the full board for final approval. Okay. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, that passed unanimously. Any other items this committee wants to? Yeah, well, can you just help me remember that we need to make sure that that's maybe separated out, that we need to clarify on like on my paper and stuff, that those are kind of two separate pieces. Okay. All right, I'm looking for a motion then. Oh, there you go. Motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.